The New World Order is not just approaching, it is here. What can we do, if anything, to stop this? It's the battle between good and evil. Where do you stand? This show will be wide ranging as we talk about flat Earth, occult symbols like the cube and pentagram, the human puppets who work for the dark side promoting evil. We're going to discuss the economy, God, Jesus, Satan, the Bible, sun worship, the Illuminati, and why the ball Earth was pushed on us in the first place. In mainstream media, messages to get us off track are everywhere. On the internet, sports, music, movies, books, magazines, newspapers, and more. It's blatantly in your face and must be confronted. My guest is back from a 3+ week-long trip to India, where he is actually from. He lives in Toronto. He has a YouTube channel and a website, and we'll talk about those as the show progresses. My guest is Paul Sandhu. Paul, thank you for being here today. Thank you. Oh, your mic is muted, Paul.
There.
Perfect. There we go.
I'm new to this Google thing, so it's...
This is your first Google Hangout, I guess, right?
Yes. Most of my, so far, I've been doing is mostly through Skype. So I'm an expert on Skype, but anyway, this is cool. I like it.
All right. Well, soon
thank you for having me on your program.
Now that you've got Google figured out, you'll probably be doing more Google Hangouts. That's kind of how it goes. So
yeah, it looks good. I will definitely be doing more of these. Yes.
Yeah, they're easy and fun. Your real first name is Dash, D-E-S-H?
Yes, my real first name actually is Dash Paul. Okay, that is basically Dash in Indian, in Hindi or in some of the Indian languages means country. Okay, so it's Indian names usually have some sort of meaning. Okay, so that's my name is Dash Paul. Paul means to nourish or something. So it's like I'm the nourisher of the nation.
That's lovely. That's a good thing to be. So you used your last name and made it your first name for Paul Sandhu.
Yes. It's easier, I guess, when I moved to Canada. I've been living in Canada for a long time now. Like I was born and raised in India, but I spent a lot more of my time here than I did back there. So yes, it's just naturally my name became Paul since I've been here in Canada.
I noticed there's a high-pitched beeping noise. Perhaps, I'm just guessing because I've never heard this before. There could be your volume might be up too high on your headset, just a guess. And I hear a bit of an echo. So turn your headset down just a tad.
Okay.
When we were doing this pre-show, it wasn't making that noise, and of course it starts now.
I know, it's weird. Yeah. Because I don't know, okay, let's turn it down a little bit here and see
we'll see. I think that's what it is. Right, it's sounding good now, but we'll see in a minute.
Okay, I'm sorry. It sounds pretty clear on my end, but it's too bad.
So you turn the volume. No, it sounds good. You turned the volume down just a little, though, right?
Yeah, I did. Yes.
I think we've solved it. All right, let's proceed as if we have, and then we'll deal with it if we don't a little bit later on. All right, let's talk about the flat Earth on your channel on YouTube, Paul Sandhu. You've got actually 2 channels, right?
I do. My main one of my channels is sort of it's been dormant for a while now, which is my Bible channel where I do some Bible studies, and that's something which I plan on reviving soon and doing more of it. It's my desire and intention to actually do a whole study right through the Bible, but focus primarily in the book of Genesis and the book of Revelation.
Well, let's talk a little bit about flat Earth and how the discovery fell into your lap. It all made sense with you, I'm sure, when you looked at the Bible. But had you heard about the Earth being flat before and maybe ignored it, or from reading the Bible did you find out?
No, not really. I didn't. That's one topic I really had not studied until I came across it sometime. I'd say early fall last year. Maybe, late summer, early fall. That was the first time that I really had heard the term flat Earth, but I never took it seriously, never thought about it. It was just assumed that, we live in this solar system like we have been taught since birth. But once I did come across it, and I think it was through Mark Sargent's Clues. I think that was one of the first videos that I saw, or yeah, one of those, or Globe Skeptic, or one of those. Okay, and as soon as I saw that, it clicked with me immediately. I wasn't like something that took me days and months or whatever to believe. It right away resonated with me. I said yes, and then of course, then when you start comparing it to Scripture in the Bible, then I said yes. Okay, now I understand this deception. I've been studying deceptions for about 20 years now, conspiracies and all that. So this did not surprise me in the least bit.
Yeah, I feel the same way. It clicked with me immediately, although it took me a while to start doing videos about it. Was there a time frame when it clicked with you to when you actually started putting videos out on your channel?
Not long. I would say maybe no more than 2 months, maybe 6 weeks or so, before I did my first one. My first one was an interview with Mark Sargent, and that was rather alarming for a lot of my audience because
yeah, I was going to ask.
Most of my work that I've done in the past few years has been economic, financial in nature, and so it was quite a departure from that.
Right,
so
but
most
did
of
you
the
have a lot
people,
of
were shocked. Some were not, but it was, the response generally to that first interview was negative. But since then, it's been getting better. There has been more people that are at least willing to examine it, and there are more that are coming on board that believe in it already.
Yeah, that's wonderful. A lot of channels that are established, as yours has been, when they actually bring up flat earth, they get a lot of people unsubscribing and a lot of people messaging and saying, you're crazy, what are you doing, you're discrediting yourself. And then slowly but surely, some of them look into it, some of them come back, and then you build a whole new audience on top of it. So I'm sure that's what's happened to you. And I did listen to your interview with Mark Sargent that you broke up in several parts, and it was really well done and very interesting. So let's talk about the deception. You said you've been a person involved in looking at conspiracies for quite some time. Boy, this is the biggest deception that I've ever run across, and most of us in the flat earth world feel the exact same way. Why the deception? What's your take on it, Paul?
Well, the why of this is a rather, I would say, a deep question, because it is not just about the flat earth. When you really start looking into it, what the question that arises is basically about our own existence. Okay, it is without understanding like who we are, where we come from, why are we here, where are we going, all those questions. This deception of why will never make sense to people, and that is one common question that I'm sure comes your way quite often, as it does mine, is why would they want to do this? Okay, and this really, to answer this question, it is impossible to do so without bringing God into the equation. Okay, and this is the problem that I also noticed with the flat Earth community, or even the conspiratorial, alternative media, etc., is that when people begin to find answers without bringing God and the devil into the picture, whatever answer you're going to arrive at is going to be the wrong one. So the first question, when we talk about there's this perception is given that there's a conflict between science and religion, or God, or the Bible. But if God exists, then there's no scientist or no man or any person, or even like devil or angel, that can disprove that. Okay, so the first, from all our observations that we have in this life, when we observe the world in which we live. For example, right now we are speaking to each other through the internet. You look a little like you're trying to do some adjustment. You want me to stop for a minute?
No, you're perfect. I was just making sure that your sound was still good. Continue.
Okay,
I am
okay,
listening.
good. Okay, Patricia, what I want to say was that, that one thing which becomes obvious if a person is really honest is that everything where we live, what we use, for example, in this room that I'm sitting in, or this computer that we are speaking through, the microphone, the headset, the clothes we are wearing, the books, the DVDs, everything in here Everything is made by somebody. Okay, that is just an obvious observation that we all make, that nothing just happens by itself. Nothing just pops out of nowhere. Somebody has to plan it, somebody has to execute those plans, and that's how things come into existence. So, looking at the design of creation, looking at the design of the heavens, the earth, and the marvelous ways in everything fits and works together, it is impossible not to draw the conclusion that there has to be a creator. So any real scientist who's making these observations, the first conclusion that they ought to draw is that there must have been somebody that has designed and planned and made all these things, including our own selves. But the world in which we live, the main function of so-called science and scientists and academia is to try and disprove the existence of a creator. Now, if that's the premise that you are beginning with, no matter how many books you have read or written, no matter how many degrees you have, your conclusions are going to be wrong. And that's what has happened, is that science, or so-called science, is not like honest, especially in regards to modern physics and astronomy and just about anything to do with academia. It is anti-God. And that is not honest, it is not scientific, it is not reasonable, it is not logical. So the first understanding in person who wants to get some real understanding, the first conclusion we need to draw is that there has to be somebody who has made all this, whom we call the creator. Now, who the creator is, I personally believe in the Bible. So therefore, although I was not raised in a Christian, I don't come from a Christian family or a Christian background or whatever, but this is something that happened to me personally over my life, many, many years ago, that I came to believe in it. And since then, I've studied the Bible for some 30 plus years now. And I become, more convinced of its truth every day than the day before. Okay, so according to people like us who believe in the Bible, who would call themselves Christian, that creator is the God of the Bible, who is identified as Jehovah, okay, the self-existent one, the great I am. That's who made everything. Now, some people may have a different view of who this God is, and that's their prerogative and their right to believe and think as they do. But the fact remains that unless that is our beginning point, that there is a creator, none of this will make sense. There's really not even a point in talking about the flat earth or any other topic for that matter, because in the end, what are we going to accomplish if we don't even know who we are or where we came from?
Right. It's the Big Bang. If you're into scientism and if you believe in God, or if you want to call that the creator, then you've got to look toward God that made this flat plane that we live on. It really only makes sense, and that's what happened to me. I was not really an atheist, but grew up not really in a religious family, and when this all happened, it all kind of clicked. It took a little while, but it all kind of clicked, and I said to myself, then there must be God. And I even said to myself in my own head, God, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I, all these years, had just not believed that you existed. I never spoke out vehemently against God or joined atheist groups or anything, or had an atheist bumper sticker on my car. But, I just was looking at things logically, I thought. And I thought logic and reason and the Big Bang and evolution. And my whole world's been changed. And there are very many people that I know who've had the same exact experience. But what brought you to God? You said so long ago. Well, not to God. I mean, you grew up with it.
Well, I grew up in I come from a Hindu Sikh background, okay?
Right.
That's my family background. But we were not really, I did not grow up in a very religious family per se. Like my mother was religious or whatever, but my dad wasn't, So we weren't like a super religious family or anything, but that's the background that I came from. In my own personal experience, however, I had always, for some reason, been very, very attracted to the Bible, to Jesus. I always wanted to know more, even since I was a child. And where I grew up, there was no such thing. There were no churches, no Bibles, nothing. It was not even heard. The first time I met a real Christian was when I was like a teenager. He was a kid in my school, and he was a Catholic. And now I find, of course, now I know that the last person you want to ask about the Bible is a Catholic, because they know nothing about it, because Catholicism is not real Christianity. Anyhow, but that's how I was always drawn towards Jesus in my life for some reason. And of course, when Jesus said in the Bible that no man can come to me except the Father draw him, and that draw has been in my life since a very, very young age. And then when I moved to Canada, like certain circumstances happened. I met certain people in college and work, etc., that pointed me in that direction. It took a few years, but eventually I did come to believe in him. And it was a real experience for me. It honestly was. It was like, when people talk about being born again, but me, it was like almost like, Saul of Tarsus kind of experience, I would say. In that one night when that happened, I stayed up all night and read the whole New Testament. I didn't understand much of it at that time, but I did. And even then, through that very first time, I could understand. I said, man, yeah, this is what I'm reading here is what I always thought that God should be. When I began to understand about his love and his character and who he is as a person. Although that understanding at that time was very, it was just the beginning. I hardly knew him at that time, but it was very powerful. And since then, it's been, my faith has never changed. I've never stopped believing. I've done things which are, we wouldn't consider to be very Christian. We all fall off and we deviate from the path and we do things which we shouldn't. And yes, but that's how it happened with me.
I do know that you mentioned what you said about Catholics earlier, and there are a number of Catholics who are flat earthers who may be watching this, who may have been offended by what you said about Catholicism. And one man's opinion I want the listeners to keep in mind, and that is the man that we're interviewing today. So, just wanted
Well,
to
if you are a
put that out there.
Catholic, I'm not. It's like whether you're Hindu, for example, or a Muslim. Okay, you're not a Christian. Not according to the Bible. And that is just a fact. Okay, Catholicism and Christianity are not one and the same. Okay, it's a different religion. And as a Catholic, I think it behooves them to understand. I think people should understand who they believe in. That is something I would strongly suggest that people should do. And most people, they don't. Religion for most people is just a ritual. Okay, it's like going to church on Sunday and listening or singing a couple of hymns and going home after lunch. And same thing with Catholics, go to mass, or a Hindu will go to the temple, they'll do their ceremony of putting milk or something, whatever happens. But they don't really understand what it is that they believe in. And that, I think, is something which we all is a responsibility that has been placed upon us, which we should all take very seriously. God has given us a mind. He has given us, a faculty of thinking, reasoning, studying, and he expects us to use those. So that's what I meant, that Catholicism is not Christianity. So, if you were to talk to a Catholic about the Bible, they don't even have Bibles in the church. And for the longest time, the Catholic Church forbade the reading of Scripture by the common people. Okay, so there's a reason for that, because if we do understand the Bible and we use our God-given faculty of our mind and our reasoning and our understanding, then perhaps we will come to the understanding that all the religions, all of them, I'm not just picking on Catholicism, even like so-called Protestant religions, they are all businesses rather than the place or the avenue to bring a person to God.
I do agree with the business aspect, most definitely. You know what you were saying about people don't know what they believe in of all religions, and I agree about with that, generally speaking. But it also kind of works with the heliocentric model. People who believe in the heliocentric model because they were taught it in school, when asked, don't even know what they believe in. They don't know the ins and outs, and it seems that flat earthers have know more about the model that we no longer believe in than the people who actually believe in it. But I know that you see the heliocentric model as basically sun worship.
Well, it is sun worship, and there are two symbols that are the most prevalent ones in our world. One is that of the sun, and the other one is that of the globe. Okay, but the sun has been worshipped. People talk about different gods, like the gods of Egypt, etc. But when you put it all together, across the board, in any culture, religion, background, whether it was the native Indians or the South American Indians or the tribal people of Australia, the Hindu people of India, the sun has been the one god, Helios, as he's called in the Greek, who has been worshipped more than anybody else. You can go to India today and you'll see that, in the morning, people face the east, and like you read about in the book of Ezekiel, and they worship the sun. So the sun is definitely the god of all religions other than true Christianity.
Is
And
that, in
that's
your
even in
opinion?
Catholicism, the thing, I forget what it's called now, the carry is the sun,
Yes,
the
yes.
rays of the sun shooting out.
Well, on a very base primitive level, is that because the sun represents warmth and grows the crops and brings the light of day to us?
Yeah, that's I would say, the excuse that is given. Okay.
What's the real
Bec-
reason?
well, the real reason is because the reality is that there's a God and there's a devil. Okay. We live like in Genesis chapter 3, when that story about what happened in the Garden of Eden. The Garden of Eden was a very special event that took place there. Okay. In that garden, God had a tree which was called the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Now, if you picture this garden, so there's this tree of the knowledge of good and evil. There was also the tree of life. But these trees, this tree of knowledge, good and evil, represented two absolutes. And those two absolutes are God and the devil. It's light and darkness. It's life and death, good and evil. So in that garden, we had God, we had the devil, and man was smack in the middle. Okay. So since that time, and this did not happen by accident, God did this because this was necessary for these things to happen the way they did. And I won't go into too much detail as to why that must have happened. Okay, but what did happen was that man was put in the middle between these two absolutes. Okay, and he was required to make a choice. And what happened, we all know the choice that he made. And some people will say that was the wrong choice, perhaps, but that was the only choice that could have been made. But since that time, and until evil is abolished forever, man is always in the middle. Okay, we always think of terms of gray, but gray is not, that's being lukewarm. It's neither one side or the other. Okay, gray destroys you. So it has to be black or white. That is one of the reasons why the Masons always use that black and white pattern on the tiles. Or they use if you see those old movies where they had that black and white spiral.
Yes.
And the intention behind that is that if you look at that long enough, that black and white kind of blends together, it becomes a gray. So we are taught not to think in terms of absolutes. Everything becomes relative. The theory of relativity, for example. Okay, so this is the reason that yes, we do have two absolutes, and these are real beings. Okay, this is not just some kind of myth. God, the creator, and the devil, who is the exact opposite of God. They both exist, and we are in the middle. And they both have their own world. Okay, they both have their own reality. The devil's reality is actually fake, but that is the matrix we live in that he has created. In 2 Corinthians chapter 4, we are taught that the God of this world has blinded the minds of them that believe not. Just think of that. That's mind control. And how does he control our minds? How does he blind the minds of people? By creating an entirely false reality, and that includes the heliocentric model. It includes that you're flying through space. It includes the Big Bang, evolution, that all this just happened by for no reason, for no purpose, nothing. Everything came out of nothing, and here you are, just a piece of dust floating around without any meaning and purpose. On the other hand, God says in Psalm 8, you can read, "What is man that you are mindful of him?" Okay? Man has a very special place in God's creation. And therefore, the creation itself that has been made for man has a special place, particularly the earth, which was made for his habitation. This earth is not just one of the other bodies or similar to anything else that's flying out there like the sun, moon, or the stars. It is unique. There's only one earth in creation. Okay, and NASA may come out and say every week that they found a new earth like world or whatever. It's all lies. And that again comes down to that we are in the middle of two absolutes, and our whole purpose of this life is to make choices constantly, is to choose good or choose evil, choose life or choose death, choose God or choose the devil. And whether we do it consciously or unconsciously, those choices are being made for us all the time.
Yes, indeed. Every moment of every day, as you're going through life, those little tiny choices come before you. And the thing that I don't quite understand is, what if you don't know about God and then you suddenly do? What can you do to get yourself on the right track? And is it as simple as just starting to make those choices when you see a black and a white, instead of going with the black or the gray, just go with white? Start fresh.
Well,
and
gray is
then,
a convenient excuse, Patricia.
Yeah,
gray is a convenient excuse. Okay, it is that if we convince ourselves that there are no absolutes, then nothing really matters. There's no right or wrong. Then is there?
People do it all the time. Even regarding the flat earth, they say, well, how will it change my life? What does it matter? They go into a shade of gray mentality about it, when really, to me, it's black and white.
Then everybody makes their own rules. That's what it comes down to. Okay, it's all relative. What's good for me may not, what's right for me may not be right for you. And therefore, when it comes to right and wrong, we as human beings, or as mankind, we can't choose for ourselves. Somebody higher than us, somebody other than mankind, has to tell us what is right and wrong. Okay? Otherwise, there are how many? 7 billion people? We can all set our own rules then. Okay? I can write my own rule book and say this is right for me, and you write your own. So the only way to have a standard is for somebody else to set that standard, and that standard has been set by God. And it is the evil nature of man, because we are evil by nature, that we don't want that.
Are we evil by nature, though?
We are.
Really? I mean, when we're born as a baby, are we evil? I mean...
Okay, to answer those questions to you, let me just go back a little bit, okay? Let's ask this question. If there is a God, I don't know if you ever thought about this question or not. If there is a God and he has created everything, why has he created everything? Why did he create anything at all? Okay, aren't we taught that God is perfect? That he's omnipotent, he's omniscient, he knows everything, he's all powerful, he's perfect, is he not? Right?
Yes.
So why would God need to create anything at all?
That's a good question. I don't know, some answers could be because he wanted to kind of come in human form and experience life, or he wanted to see what he could create and what would happen. For his own amusement is another answer. I don't know. To see if people would choose good. And that would be part of entertainment. What do you think the real reason is?
You touched upon one of the reasons, okay, which is the real reason why. And the question then becomes is this, okay? Is God just a passive observer of his creation, or is he an active participant in it? You know, people view God like this, okay? They think that God is sitting on his, you know, great white throne in heaven, and he is just observing everybody. Oh, he's bad. Strike him down. Okay. That's how people think of God, that he is separated from his creation. Okay. That he is up there, we are down here, and he has no direct involvement with us except to be an observer and a judge. That's how most people observe God. Okay. But that is not what the Bible teaches us. God is not just a passive observer. He is very much an active participant in it. The question is, God is called the living God. Okay. How does he live life? How does God live?
Through us, I guess.
Yes, absolutely. He lives through his creation.
Okay, then
That's the purpose of creation.
How could a baby be evil then? Because the baby is
We're
part
going
of
to
God.
get to that in a second, okay? All right.
I'm curious.
I'll get to that, okay? But we're going to, this is an important concept to understand. Like, how does God experience life? Okay? God the Father in the Bible, he is not a corporeal being. Okay? He's not like flesh and blood. He wasn't, at least, until Jesus came. So, it's like what you have in your mind. Your mind is not something, is not a body. It's immaterial. You can have a thought in your mind. Your heart is not also something that is material. It is something that is a spirit. Okay? You may feel certain things. You may feel the desire to be loved, to be held, to, you know, to feel joy, happiness. In order to experience all those things, what is required is a body. Okay? It is through the body that we experience the things we think here, the things we feel here. When a man, you know, he wants, he sees a beautiful woman or whatever, and you can see the thing on a TV screen, but it is not the same as being together in person, is it? Okay? So what we feel in our minds and our hearts becomes an experience when we experience it through the body. There's a very interesting scripture in the Bible. It says, sacrifice and offering hast thou not desired, but a body hast thou prepared me. We are called the body of Christ. It is for the purpose of God, everything that he has taught and pictured and wanted and desired to experience that through his creation. That's why God has created everything. Let me give you an example, okay? Not just human beings, not just mankind, everything. In Colossians, it tells us that he has created all things. All things were created by him, but it also says all things were created for him. Now, if people could ever get this understanding through their head, that God doesn't exist for us, we exist for him, because he created all things for himself. And one way of understanding this, and this is, technology is great in giving us the understanding of creation, of God. Video games. Video games are such a great way of understanding. You know, we have Mark Sargent will really understand this with his background, okay? Video games have developed, they have come a long way since I used to play a little Pac-Man on that. You know, you remember that, Miss Pac-Man and all those?
Yes.
You know, those, when you go to the arcade. So they've advanced a long ways. Okay? Video games have become very realistic, and they have become almost coming soon there will be that you will have AI and essentially sentient characters in the game. Okay? But a video game is created for the benefit of the player, right? All the characters that are in that game, they exist solely for the benefit of the player, not for their own benefit. Whatever role is assigned to them, they play that role. But what is it? It's not doing anything for them or for their own benefit. It is for the person that's playing that, or the person that writes that game or creates that game. This is very much true in the case of God. Okay, this is like our creation that we can see, and even the invisible dimensions. They are all like a big video game. Okay, we are characters in this game. Like Shakespeare said, we are all playing a role.
All the world's a stage.
Exactly, and that is exactly true, that we are all characters in a game, and the only one that's outside of that game is God. Okay, now that this may seem, people say, oh, this is very cruel and all that, but they don't really understand the role that has been written for us. Man has a very special role in this game, and if we get to understand it, we will all be, jumping for joy, because what we have been offered and promised is so great that I can't even begin to, verbalize it here, but I'm going to try. All right. So that's how we see creation, as God is the player. He is the author of this game. And the Bible tells us as much. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. All things were made by him. And without him was not anything made that was made. This brings us to the important aspect of creation, which is language. Okay, people, when they talk about the Big Bang, they say, yeah, there was, well, we don't know if there was anything or nothing or something, and something happened and everything blew up, and here we are. Okay, so they talk about particles, and they talk about atoms and this and that, and that's what combined with this. But you know what? The basis of all creation, of everything that exists, is language. It is a programming. It is an encoding, like our DNA. Like, in the blade of grass, there's an underlying code that defines what that is. And if that code had not been written before, that thing could not exist. In Psalm 139, David said that all my members were written, talking about his body, all my members were written even before any of them came into existence.
Just like in a video game, all the codes are written before the game is fully created.
So in a video game, what we see, like even on a computer screen, we see like images, we see pictures, we see videos, we see motion, we hear sound. But the basis of that is a code. It's a mathematical string of numbers. And this is how everything exists. There has to be a language that precedes anything at all. That's why when the Bible says everything was made by his word, that is exactly right, because God is the ultimate programmer who has programmed everything, including our bodies, our minds, our souls, our hearts, and you name it. Okay? Otherwise, it could not exist. So any real scientist would come to that conclusion, that unless this thing had been defined, like an architect, when he sits down and he makes a plan, the building just doesn't pop up without those plans being made first, right? There has to be, the plans have to be drawn, measurements have to be taken, and then the execution takes place and the building comes into. So the plans always precede the construction or the formation. And that is exactly how everything was done. In the beginning was the Word. And this is programming and language. It is the basis of everything. That's why all of this particle physics, all of it is crap. Because in my opinion, particles don't even exist. But that's a different subject. Okay, so this is coming back to where we were, that how does God experience life? Why has he created everything? Let's take an eagle, for example, that is soaring through the heavens. Okay, it's majestic, it's beautiful. It's just watching it is amazing. But God doesn't just watch it. He experiences everything that that eagle is experiencing, because that's the purpose for which that eagle was created. It's like in a video game when you have a character is pulling a gun or shooting or something, whatever the emotion that is being derived or whatever is being felt by the player. I know this because my kids play video games and they get quite excited and hyper about it, So that's the eagle itself may not know what it's doing. It doesn't understand what a feeling it is that it emotes in somebody who can experience what it is experiencing. It's like, I watched this video recently. It was beautiful, about these guys in South America at Rio. They wear these wingsuits and they jump off these high cliffs and they fly. And I said, man, that is so beautiful. If I was younger, I would love to go and do this here. See, that person that is doing that, it is experiencing something that a bird would experience. Okay, but it can relate to that experience. It can value that experience, whereas the bird itself may never. The bird is just being a bird. It's just, going about its life. But if somebody else is tapping into that experience, then they are living vicariously, perhaps, but they're living through that bird.
Thus, the living God.
In this manner, God is experiencing everything that is being experienced by anything in his creation. Now that's living large, right?
Definitely.
It is. It is. That's the purpose of creation, is that it is for God to experience life. Okay? Now, man in this whole game, if you want to call that, has a special purpose. And what that purpose is, what would you say is the greatest experience of life? If I was to ask you that question.
The greatest experience of life. My answer is going to be something that would probably put my answer in the shade of gray category, which would be that depends upon the person. Let's hear your answer. It's probably more to the point.
It's love.
Oh, love would be the number one thing I would have picked, but I thought you wanted something more specific than that.
No,
yes,
it's the greatest experience of life is love.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And love can be many faceted.
Yes, love is multifaceted. It's like, the Bible does describe love, by the way, in 1 Corinthians 13. It defines what it is, okay? But we are told that God is love, okay? God is love. So then it is obvious that he knows how to love. John 3:16, which is the most famous verse in the whole Bible, it tells us, God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in him should not perish but have everlasting life. Okay. So God not only loved, he demonstrated and he proved that love. Now it stands to reason that if God knows how to love, that he would also want to be loved. Right?
Makes
in
a
a relationship between two people, okay, the best experience of love is when they both love each other. If love is only like from one-sided, then that experience is never complete. Okay, it's that a person not just wants to love, let's say a man, not doesn't want to just love the woman, he wants the woman to love him in return. It's a give and take. And that is what God would like. Not just to love, he loves his creation. There is no doubt about that. Just looking outside, my window here, and I see the beautiful fields and the trees and the waters and the skies and everything that God has made. It is so beautiful that could only stem from somebody with a beautiful heart, which has love in it. Okay. And therefore, the love of God for me is not in doubt. Okay. It is something which he has proven. He has given me the greatest proof, which is the gift, of course, of his own life. There's no greater love demonstration that could have been given, which he did. But the purpose and the reason behind it is to create a race of beings, children, who would love him in return just as much as he loves them. Okay?
So I understand what you're saying now about babies being born. They're not born evil, but they have to grow up to become aware enough to be able to love their creator. That's
well,
when
not necessarily
starts
that
making
babies are
sense.
born evil. Babies are not. The Bible tells us, that like in case of Esau, for example, or when they were born, there were two brothers, Jacob and Esau, in the book of Genesis, and you see, before they had done any good or evil. Okay. As human beings, we are born with an evil nature. That doesn't mean that a baby, when he's born, is evil. But what is going to happen is that because we have this nature in us, and there's a reason why it had to happen that way, okay, is that we will, as we grow up, we will do evil things. Everybody does, okay? That is why everyone has sinned and come short of the glory of God, and we all do. And that doesn't mean that, everybody's going to grow up to be, Hitler or something like that. But nonetheless, we all do things that would be considered to be evil. So that is our nature. And the proof of that is that we die. Mortality works in us because of our evil nature. It is that evil that contains within itself the seeds of its own destruction, and it destroys us in the end, even though, like I said, we are not necessarily going about murdering, killing people, but that evil is, Jesus said, a little leaven leavens the whole lump. It is in us. That is what kills us. Okay? If we didn't have any evil in us whatsoever, we would not die. That is the reason for the corruption that works in us. It is the nature of evil that we live in and that we are born into. But good and evil had to be, evil had to be present in creation, without which certain things couldn't happen. Okay? The purposes of God could not have been fulfilled without evil, and therefore the purpose of evil is not, the existence of evil is not accidental. Okay? It didn't happen by accident. The devil didn't just come into existence of his own power or volition. It is something also that has been planned by God to fulfill his own purposes. Okay? So people, when you ask me that question, is that baby evil? The baby is not evil. But if the baby lives long enough, he is going to do some evil things. Okay? There's no doubt about that. And therefore, at the end of that life, that's why this corruption works in us, because we are evil by nature.
So the corruption about the ball earth and the puppeteers who have allowed that to happen, or actually caused it to be in our consciousness, pulling the strings of those who are in charge. Is that Satan, the devil, working puppeteers. Is that part of God's plan, so that Earth would appear to be a ball to us, and then we would become more aware and become more good and rise up against it?
Well,
it's hard to
yes, I
tell.
would. I mean, no. It's
a thought.
ball Earth is just one of those things. Okay, Patricia. We literally live in the matrix. Almost everything that we have been taught and everything that most people believe in is false. Okay, almost everything. I mean, yes, this is the big one. This is the granddaddy of them all. No doubt about it. The ball Earth, or the whole concept of this solar system and the madly expanding universe and all that. Yes, it is an absolute insanity. It is not just something which is a little bit deceptive. It is insanity on you know, on a very grand scale. So in that way, you got to hand it to the devil. You know, he does things very, very audaciously. Like, his lies are not just small ones. His lies are very, very big. Okay. But what I was trying to get at was this, that man, okay, is that creature in God's creation that has been chosen to become perfected in love. Okay. It is to become a God being, literally. To become the same as God in character. And that is what the word image means, okay? Most people don't understand what it means when it says that man is created in the image of God. God created man to bear his image, okay? And that word image, especially, is the Greek word. In the Greek, it is the word character. The English word character has been transliterated from the Greek into the English. It means character, okay? And the character of God is love. So literally, we are the creatures that were chosen. And character formation, the way it's described in the Bible, it is like when you take, for example, a branding iron and you brand a cow, okay? It is stamping that. And that is what we have been chosen for, is that character of love to be stamped on our own hearts. And it is that love which drives out all of the evil. It drives out all of the corruption. It drives out the mortality, the death that works in us. That is what gets rid of that and makes us ready to be a people that are going to be the people of God, who are going to be humans in body, but God in character. That is the purpose of all of this here. And all of this involves the existence of evil. It involved the existence of the devil. It involved that once evil entered, it would soon bring in death, would follow. You know, we would become mortals. All these things had to happen that way, because it is in the midst of that that God would do his work of showing us his love. Because without seeing love in action, we could never understand it, and we could never be transformed into those creatures that are the creatures of love, like he is. He said, as God is, so are we. He says, as he is, so are we in this world. This idea that you can just learn how to love is not, no, love does not come to us naturally. Love is a spiritual force. It's the greatest power, the spiritual power in anywhere. And this is something which is a very, very, it's a process, okay? It's a process that involves all these things. And that is why we are here. Everybody thinks that this life is it. This life is not. This life has been given us only to get a taste of life, okay? We are here in this life to have a little taste of life, but our real life, because this, you know, few years, what do we have, 40, 50, 80, 100 years, it's nothing. It goes by like the dew on the grass, like in the morning it's there, and especially down where you are, it must get really hot pretty quickly and the dew just evaporates, it's gone. That's what a man's life is. We have very short lives. We are here for a day or two, and then we are gone. But it is this life, which is the 40, 50, 100 years, whatever time we are given, in which God can take us, okay, from these evil, rotten creatures. And we don't need to discuss the evil that exists in this world. You're quite familiar with this, so am I.
Yes, yes.
Okay? So he can take us and he can transform us from mankind to Godkind. And that's what makes us ready for real life, which is going to come. This world was never designed to be a permanent world. It was always designed to be temporary. It's a school. And just think how great God is that he would create this whole creation just as a school to teach us. And what he's teaching us is love, showing us his love, by giving us his love. And the real demonstration of love can only take place when it is shown to a people that don't deserve love. Okay, that's the meaning of unconditional love. Therefore, the condition which we were in had to be unlovable, which means we had to be evil. That's why all these things happened. And now we are going to be, if we believe that, we will be a people that will be ready, to whom God can entrust this kingdom, whom he can give us these things without us turning back to evil again, because we have come to understand that love and we have been perfected in love. That's
Very
what makes
beautiful.
man special.
Yeah, beautiful.
Okay, so
Beautiful
if
to know
man is
this.
special, then this whole thing with the ball earth and the Big Bang, does the Big Bang have any special place for man?
No.
What did Carl Sagan say? He gets up and he shows this big slide, oh, this is where you are. You're on that little blue dot, just in a little beam of sunlight, just a little speck of dust. That's where we are. By the way, that video with Carl Sagan is very interesting because it proves something. It proves that this whole model of the solar system is crap by using their own information. And that I'm doing a video on that right now. He did a very famous speech, Carl Sagan, this blue dot Earth and all that. But when you really start analyzing what they were showing, the whole model of their solar system in particular, it just falls apart if we only use our head when we watch it. Anyhow, but in that model, which is the Big Bang, we are nothing. We have no meaning. We have no purpose. We are nobody. Right? That's what that model does, is that it reduces us to a piece of dust floating around, rather than that special creature to whom God demonstrated his own love by giving his own life. That was that special. God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son. Okay? And therefore, we are not just one of billions out there. We are not just, nothing to be accounted of. We are special. And that is why the world and the home that we live on has to be special. There are only two places in creation where corporeal life can exist. One is heaven, and one is the earth. None of the other bodies that, we told us, oh, this is Mars and that's there and Jupiter and this and that, they are not terra firma, and they were not designed to host life like the moon. The moon is not a ball of dirt. The moon is, I don't know what exactly it is, but it is something which is a luminous body, and it's like a light bulb. That's what it is. So all these stories that are the model that has been created using people like Newton, who just happened to be a banker and a mason, very good qualifications for a person who's going to tell you the truth, right? Einstein, who's not only, financed to the nth degree by the bankers. Time magazine calls him the man of the century. And if Time honors you that way, then you can think what he really was probably was the liar of the century. Okay? And these Jesuits that come out of Rome, Galileo, Copernicus, and all these guys that come out of Rome, Rome has been, the cesspool of all such activity for a very long time, going back over 2,000 years. Who is it that crucified Jesus Christ? It was Rome. Okay? So all of these people have been out there promoting this model, which is demonstrably false, and without any proof, they keep shoving it down our throats. And if we question it, we are the ones that are, ridiculed, made to look like fools. Oh, you don't know anything. Go take a physics course. How many times have you heard that?
Oh, yes. Every day, probably. There's a comment like that on one of my videos. Go back to school. You're a moron.
Psalm 19 tells us, the heavens declare the glory of God. The firmament shows his handiwork. Day unto day shows knowledge. Okay? When God wrote those words, he didn't say you need a degree from MIT or, you need to go to Cornell or something like that to be able to understand his creation. No, he's given us a mind and he's given us the brain to understand it. The word logos, God is called the Word. Okay, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. That word in the Greek is logos, Logos, logos. Logos is the word from which we get words such as logic, reason, understanding, knowledge. All of these things, especially reason and logic, are a fundamental meaning of that word. And without the logos, without God, without the mind of Christ, it is not possible to be logical. And therefore, we hear these illogical arguments all the time. And you can't get through to people that, hey, this is insane what you're proposing here. Can't you see it? But they can't, because their minds are still blinded.
It's interesting that all of the brand names, the logos, are the new gods for many people, like Apple products or Nike, Coca-Cola, these logos of various companies that are the new symbols almost of worship, because money is what's most important, it seems, in most societies. Interesting word to use, logo.
Absolutely. Isn't that? You're absolutely right. It's language.
All connected.
It is everything. Words, even in the Bible, it tells us, God said, that we are going to be held accountable for every word that comes out of our mouth. Okay, words are very important. And even in Orwell's book, 1984, very intelligent man. Okay, and I respect that book next only to the Bible. And what that real message in that book was, the transformation of society through the corruption of language. That's what that book is really about. Newspeak, doublespeak.
Mm-hmm.
It's about language. Everybody thinks it's about, the police state and totalitarianism and all that. Yes, it's all tied into that. But the main message of that book was language, corruption of language, and that's how your mind is controlled. It says, they're going to simplify language so much, they're going to remove so many of the complex grammar and words from our language that people won't even be able to, without words, you can't think. Okay? Without that, you won't even be able to think rebellion or think, how to resist if you can't formulate the thought in your mind because you don't have the words. And that's been happening through our education system. right? I grew up in that even since like after the war, like up into the end of the 19th century and stuff, education was, much more sophisticated than it is today, especially the teaching of language and grammar. But even in the 60s and 70s when I was going to school, you know, even by then it had been corrupted because, I regretted that, they didn't really teach us like very good grammar and, the classical education. We didn't get that. Like it's already had been corrupted to a degree. And now, today, it's like 100 times worse.
Very true. And people are worried, very worried, as we've, in the flat earth world anyway, become aware of God if we weren't already, and or the Creator, depending upon how you'd like to think of that, about the New World Order. And many of us were involved in looking at conspiracies prior to the flat Earth revelation. The New World Order, are you yourself, because you've traveled a lot and you were just in India, do you see things happening in India that would lead you to believe we've got a lot of trouble coming our way very, very soon?
Yes, one of the things which is very obvious is, according to the Bible, anyhow, we are told about the mark of the beast and this buying and selling being controlled, the economic system, in which is basically centralized for the whole world. Okay. And now, 30 plus years after moving here, the difference that I see in India when I visit there, for example, is that India has become just another corporate branch like every other place in the world. Okay. So that corporatization of the world, it has progressed to a much greater degree than most people will realize. It has happened all over the world, whether you go to China or to India or travel in Europe, wherever. What do we see? McDonald's, Starbucks, Hilton hotels, the whole thing, even in Russia, wherever, anywhere on earth, it is the same. So those powers, the bankers, in my younger days, now that I look back, at that time I didn't understand these things that well, and I'm sure most of us didn't because we were otherwise occupied. But now that I look back, nations at that time still had a degree of independence, especially in regards to their economic policies and how the countries were run, in control over their central banks. That is gone. The central bank governor, as he's called in India, like Yellen here in the Federal Reserve, like her counterpart in India, he's also like a Harvard boy, trained here, sent back to do the bidding of the masters from New York and London. So that has happened. So that we are much closer to that time where this centralization of control through money and banking can be and will be executed in the very near future, I would think. It does happen for all intents and purposes. It is just that there is a superficial appearance of independence that still exists. But there are no such things in independent countries. And it is not the United States that's controlling it. The United States is itself controlled, just as England would be controlled or Switzerland would be controlled. It is a group of people, bankers, who are beholden to their unseen master, who is Satan, that are running the show.
Yes. I know in India there's a horrible heroin problem that's brought in, I believe, from Afghanistan, and people, especially the men in poorer areas, are becoming addicted, and of course, thus despondent, unable to work, and a really bad scene. When you were there, what did you see, and how did it make you feel, and how different was it since the last time you were there?
Well, it's like night and day. What has happened there is in recent times, uh, the region that I come from, the state is called Punjab. Okay, it's on the border with Pakistan. And the route that heroin takes is that it comes from Afghanistan into Pakistan, and then the first place it touches is where my, family for many, many generations lived and grew up. Okay, so that's the areas. And so all along the border between India and Pakistan, all those villages and towns that are in that vicinity anyhow, in that whole state, they have been really ravaged by this scourge of heroin in particular. Okay, because since the mission in Afghanistan began back in 2001, okay, to remove the scourge of the Taliban, and as Tony Blair promised, to go and bomb the poppy fields. What has in reality happened is that the poppy production and the opium production and heroin production has actually skyrocketed. Okay, so it has become so great that it's more, there's a surplus of it. Okay, a lot of it is shipped off to Europe.
Do you believe this is part of a New World Order plan that's hidden from all
yeah.
of us to soft kill off the male population? Therefore, there won't be more children born. Kind of that kind of thing.
Oh yeah, it's a tried and tested formula. This worked in China during the Opium Wars in the 19th century. The Brits, they've been doing this for a long time. So that's exactly what they were trying to do back then, was to subdue the population by turning them into addicts. So that, of course, kills off, makes the males all unproductive. And most of the societies, they function on the male being the breadwinner, okay, being the provider. And if he's providing, then he can provide for his children, who can then perhaps get an education, better themselves, and so on and so forth. But if the male is taken out of the equation, then all that the woman can do is just try and survive and keep her children alive. And in many cases, it doesn't happen. It's like really actually very, very tragic. Tragic is the right word, because you see a lot of these young men, who are right from their teen years into their 20s, like they are addicted, so they are doing criminal things. There is a lot of problems with incest, and you name it, like all kinds of horrible things are going on there. And it is directly related to when I was growing up in those times. Nobody even heard of. Yes, people opium has always been around in the East, okay? And there always used to be a few people that were addicted to opium and stuff, but nowhere near on the scale that these drugs are a problem now. Even alcohol back then was not really as serious a problem as these drugs are in the present time. So it's devastated that used to be the richest state in the country, but it is really devastating it. It doesn't look very bright for their future. And that, I'm sure, is going to spread through the rest of India as well. It is not just going to be limited to that one area, although that's where the biggest problem is right now at the moment.
Well, there's highly congested cities in India, as well as much land. It's an agrarian society, I believe, for the most part. And the Monsanto company has made inroads into India. It's not just the United States anymore. And the farmers there are having issues with that. And gold is something that people of India praise highly and keep, and even the poorest among them wear gold jewelry and have gold, and it's used as money in many cases. Let's talk about farmers and Monsanto and Roundup and gold and how all of these things are tied together as part of a New World Order agenda in India.
Well, the Bible says the love of money is the root of all evil, and that is absolutely true. That money is people are easy to buy when you have money. And when people go to India, like, companies, corporations from the US, from Europe, they come, they got lots of cash that they wave around. So it's easy to buy a few politicians. One of the things about India was that they had very strong laws against sale of agricultural land, etc., to foreign corporations, or, basically to foreigners. Like, agricultural land was considered to be sacred, and that was necessary because so many people are dependent upon it for their livelihood. A man may only have like a couple of acres, okay, but that was enough to feed his family, to keep them fed. And this is something, which one of the comments I read in one of my YouTube videos was, okay, well, maybe they lose their farm, so what's the big deal? They can move to the city. The situation in India is not quite what you would have in the US or in Canada. Okay, you lose your farm, yeah, you can go to the city, the government will still give you welfare, you'll still be able to have a pretty, you're not going to starve to death. Or there it's a matter of life and death. There is no social security. There is no, there are no social benefits for people. If that's the only livelihood they have and that's gone, then it literally means death for the man and his family and everybody around him. So what happens with this in the past, I'd say maybe 15 years or so, is that these corporations like Monsanto, etc., they've gone into India, and they have, first of all, paid off the politicians, so they allowed the sale of all these products, which are very destructive. And then they also allow their sales reps to go around, and they go to these farmers and they say, okay, well, here's our seed. If you plant this seed, your crop is going to double and you're going to make tons of money, and you're going to be, there you go. It'll be like a lottery win for you. But the reality is that in India is it's a sort of a unique country that in many respects, like from one area to the next, and we're talking not like thousands of miles, like even within a couple 100 miles, the soil will change completely. The climate will change. Things will happen. So over the centuries, they have developed crops that are suitable for that particular area. So you can't just have one seed that is going to work all across the nation. It won't. Okay. So they've developed, like in India, for example, they used to have like over 1,000 varieties of rice because they're so localized. And now that with this Monsanto and these big agri businesses that have gone in there, that has been their great push, that, use this seed from America. Is like much better, and your crop yields are going to double and triple. And that may be true to an extent that, in America or in Canada, that seed may actually produce a very bumper crop. But it is not suitable for that soil. Or it may require that it needs a lot more irrigation, for which they don't have the facilities because they're just depending on rain. And that seed that we're using was suitable, that even if it rained a little bit, it would still produce a crop and they would be able to survive. So a lot of these farmers were conned into this game, and they bought these seeds. And then along with that, of course, the Roundup, so that it'll, drive all the weeds out and all that. And, again, your crop will be better. And then they found out that it didn't work. And in order to buy that seed, these people had to go into debt. Okay? That's how they were sold. And the collateral that they gave was their land. So, of course, when the crop fails, then not only the man not have a crop, he doesn't have his land anymore. So a lot of these farmers, and I was reading this little, the ticker tape at the bottom of the screen in one of the airports or something, and they were showing a statistic that last year in 2015, they had some like 12,500 farmers that committed suicide. And that in previous years, some years it's been like 25, 26,000. And a lot of them actually drink Roundup and kill themselves. And there's many videos on YouTube you can see about these, the widows and the kids, and like, the devastation that has been left behind. In other ways too, India has been used like sort of a giant a laboratory, where the pharma companies have gone in and they have been given license to do experimentation or to try their drugs without any checks and balances. So a lot of people have been crippled, become invalid, died, and again, they don't get any compensation. There's no government support for them because the politicians that allow these practices to go on, they probably got a few $1,000,000 sitting in their Swiss bank accounts now, and they don't care.
So that's the pharmaceutical industry that's in there, along with the agribusiness industry.
Absolutely, absolutely. And now what's happened, the next step is that they are going to allow. India is a country which only functions with little mom and pop shops. Okay, like a little mom where they have like a little fruit garden and they can grow some tomatoes or whatever and fruits, and they can sell that at their shop and they can survive on that. Now they want to allow like big corporations like Walmart and all these to go in there and compete with them as far as grocery stores, food sales are concerned. And that again is going to have a very negative and devastating effect. And the politicians keep harping the same mantra, foreign direct FDI, foreign direct investment is going to be good for us. It's going to be good for the country. You have foreign direct investment coming. Yes, it's good for the people that are running the country, but for the people at the bottom, it's devastating. So India has changed dramatically that in some parts, if you go to cities like Delhi and Bombay, you can go to these malls that would be like anything you might see on Michigan Avenue in Chicago or something, but in other parts, for the majority of the people, which is like their 800 million or so, which are the poor class, they're much worse off than they were before all this stuff started.
Well, with all
globalization,
of these things,
globalization.
Yeah, globalization. With the malls coming in and Walmart and the grocery stores that Walmart and other stores, big mega chains have, it also will affect the people's health. They will no longer be eating their native diet, which probably consists more of more natural things, and they'll be eating the processed diets, and there will be more illnesses. But then the pharmaceutical company will be right there to give them drugs. So it's all a big scam. Let's talk a little bit about gold. I know that since you just came back from a 3+ week trip to India, that there's billboards all over with gold on them, talking about gold and advertising gold, the significance of gold in India and how it's really a strong currency, and the people don't want to use paper money. Let's talk about that. We have about maybe 9 more minutes or so. We can do that. And then I want to talk about how we can end the New World Order. Let's fit that all into 7 minutes, right?
Well, yes, India has always been, has had basically a great deal of love most of the people have had for gold. Okay. They love their gold down there. And yes, it is very visible. And the gold you're talking about there is usually like 22, 24 karat gold. So it's like pure gold.
Very soft.
For the most part. Okay. So yes, even like person that might come to, the maid that might come to sweep your home or whatever to clean it, she'll be wearing her gold bangles and rings and all that, or chains. So gold is very, very prevalent there. And especially in weddings and as a form of gift giving, whatever, it is the most valued commodity. Okay, especially like if you have a daughter that's getting married, it's customary to give a certain amount of gold, and the more gold you give, the more prestigious it's considered to be. Some of these women, like if you see, like she could easily be wearing like maybe 20, maybe a kilo of gold on her at certain wedding functions or whatever, with all the chains and necks and rings and all that kind of stuff. So yes, one of the things which, yes, they do advertise their big billboards with jewelers and, gold companies and all that all over. But one thing which I noticed, which is something which is also new, recent, is a lot of the financial institutions, not a lot of them, all of them, now they have these signs which say gold loan. Okay, you'll see a big neon sign or whatever outside. It says gold loan. And essentially what they do is that you can walk in there with your gold and they'll gladly take it as collateral and give you some paper money in exchange. And what we've been talking about with the farmers and all these poor people, because they're getting more and more impoverished. In many cases, I mean, that's their last piece of wealth that they have, is this gold that they had. And if it goes into these financial institutions, I'm just afraid that this is, not afraid, I'm concerned that this is another ploy that is being used now to take the last thing that these people had, which is that gold. So there is a genocide in the works in that respect when you just consider the hundreds of thousands of farmers, and then those are just the farmers. And just imagine how many of the kids and families and who knows how many others followed them whose statistics are not recorded. That's just one aspect of it. And it is the other aspect is that as the poor get poorer, there's going to be no options for them. It is not that somebody is going to come and save them. They are going to die off. That is the only logical conclusion. And engineered famines have happened in India in the past. Okay? It is not something that is limited to the Ukraine under Stalin or something. The Brits did it in Bengal in India, even in the 17th, 18th century. There's quite, a record of that, of how millions of people have been, these engineered famines have been created. So those are the things that are going on there. One of the other things which is interesting, which I really didn't talk in any of my videos, is, but I will mention it here. India is also being used as the largest biometric. They are testing this biometric databasing in India, where they're going to collect biometric information for some like 500 million people. And,
what for? That sounds quite frightening.
Well, according to them, the official story is that we have no social safety net in India. Okay, and they do have programs. Okay, they do have programs. Every government has programs that are supposed to be there to help the people. And well, these programs are being misused. So we want to make sure that the money or whatever it is we are offering gets to the right people. So we're going to collect their biometric data and we're going to give them this card. And then, it'll ensure that they get what is rightfully theirs. And of course, that'll never happen. But in this way, there's a major project underway right now where the goal eventually is to collect biometric data on everybody in the country. We're talking like 1.3 billion people. And if they can do it there, in a place like Canada, the United States, it should be a relatively easy thing to do.
They will do it. They will do it. You can see it coming.
So that's another thing, which is the prophetic prophecy being fulfilled, which will be, of course, lead to the mark of the beast systems. And these systems are being tested out there right now.
So in the remaining 7 minutes we have, let's talk about solutions. All of these things that are happening in India, yes, we're just talking about India, but similar things are happening all over the plain. What can we do? Now, you mentioned God and love, but what can we do aside from turning to God and sharing love with others? Should we start preparing or continue preparing with food and water, supplies? Do we need to vote? I mean, I don't vote. Can we do anything through government to change this? Do we need to tear the government down? And how do we do it? What are your thoughts?
Well, my thoughts on that would be that as far as the government is concerned or voting is concerned, it's a complete waste of time.
I
Okay.
agree.
I mean, this whole charade that's going on with Trump and Hillary and all that, you know, oh yeah,
Distraction.
let's vote Trump and things will change. No, they won't change. Trump is just another one of the, you know, old boys club, then just as much as Hillary is. He just plays the role that's been written out for him. So politicians, they are basically script readers. Okay. They don't make any policy. They don't have any say. They just do what they're told. They toe the line. And in that respect, this may, you know, not be something that people want to hear. But we have to look at it like I look at it as from a Bible and a Christian perspective, that in this life, we really don't have much hope, Patricia. Okay? If we expect everything to become perfect, it's not going to happen. This time that we're living in, this age that we are living in, this is the age of pain and suffering, okay? This is not the perfect age or the perfect world yet. That lies beyond this time. Our hope lies beyond this body. No matter what we do, this body is going to die, okay? So in that respect, the best thing we can do is to be bold and to speak the truth, even if it costs us our own lives. So what? I mean, we're dead anyhow, right? So we may as well go out with boldness and without fear, like you speaking about the subject that you speak about, and in the hope that there's going to be perhaps a few. Jesus said, narrow is the way and few there be that find it. I have no illusions that we are going to have a mass awakening. Everybody keeps talking about this mass awakening. It's not going to happen. But that at the same time doesn't mean that we lie down and die. The Bible says a prudent man foresees the evil and hides himself. So preparation, of course, is something that is very, it's a wise thing to do. And you know, the only issue I have right now is that how does a person really prepare for these times? It's a very difficult times that are going to come. And you know, we, of course, we can prep by having food, maybe some gold and silver. Ideally, if it were at all possible, I mean, we should be self-sufficient.
Yes.
Okay. Now that's a very difficult thing, especially for people in urban areas.
I'm not self-sufficient. Are you?
No.
Right.
No.
Most of us. I commend those that are, but preparing is one way, and having enough to share with your neighbors is another way. But then, of course, we all know the human condition and nature, as we discussed earlier. There will be fighting with each other when things come to that point. So that's where God and love comes in, and working toward that next life.
Above all, we need faith in God. Okay, that's what is necessary. And by that, I just don't mean like a cliche. Okay, it's an understanding that yes, He is. The Bible says that, you know, whoever comes to Him must believe that He is, and that He is a rewarder of those who diligently seek Him. Now, you know, down in your neck of the woods, I'm sure they got a lot of preachers running around, and the rewards they talk about is like 100-fold return and money and, you know, material things. We're not talking about those rewards. The reward is a reward of peace that passes understanding. The reward is a conviction and a hope, which is called the anchor of our souls. Like this incident, you know, when Jesus was on the boat with his disciples and the storm came and the waves are, you know, like the boat is up and down, rocking away, and all these disciples are freaking out. And they go down and he was sleeping. Okay. So that's the place that God alone can bring us. That in these times when there will be a great deal of turmoil, where there will be death and destruction all around us, and maybe we ourselves will be killed, because Jesus said, many of you are going to be killed. He didn't say that we are going to have a safe passage, through this life. No, he didn't promise that. But it is still not a reason for us to lose hope.
That's a good way to end our show.
We do prepare. We, stock up on dry foods, do some things, have something, whatever that you can last at least 2-3 months if you need to, and, barricade yourself in, then have like a water source, have food. And beyond that, I really, it's difficult to have like a long term, like in the movies where they show you the guy's got his bunker filled with, he's set for the next 30 years. I'm sorry, I'm not in a position to do that.
No, none of us really are. This has been wonderful. Your website is wakeupandlive.com, correct?
Wakeupandliveradio.com.
Oh, excuse me, wakeupandliveradio.com. And I will put that in the description box of this video. My guest has been Paul Sandhu, Sandhu, and his YouTube channels will be linked in the description box. This has been such a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you for taking your time and doing it today.
Yeah, thank you, Patricia. Thank you for having me on. And I want to just, commend you that you have a very, you're a great host, because you let your guests speak, without interrupting, without being an Alex Jones, and trying to, interrupt all the time, and just to show how smart you are. So that's really wonderful that, you bring these people on, and I learn a lot from, all those people that are on different backgrounds, different subjects.
And so I learn a lot too. Great. Yeah. I appreciate it. Well, this concludes episode number 84 of Flat Earth and Other Hot Potatoes. I'm Patricia Steere. That's Paul Sandhu. Keep it flat.